The HOA president's spoiled, arrogant male offspring initiated a deliberate act of hostile occupation, positioning his conspicuously bright yellow sports car, a literal target, directly across the entirety of my non-negotiable driveway. His pathetic operational excuse was a declaration of dominance. He demanded the exact location and possessed zero concern for my mandated departure timeline. This act of entitled defiance was the single fatal decision that would terminate his $90,000 asset with a non-negotiable ticket, a secured tow, and a total liquidated Porsche in the same solar cycle. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now. I am Chad Reed. My identity is built on a simple, rigid operational principle. A man's driveway is his absolute sovereign kingdom, and it is forbidden from being categorized as a temporary stopping zone for a vehicle that visually registers as a giant, enraged hornet asset. On my second documented day in Heaton County, I processed the data that my new neighbor, Karen Winters, failed to align with reality. She was the president of the Homeowners Association, a designation she deployed like a crown forged from the misery of her fellow occupants. Her son, Tyler, piloted the Yellow Hornet and pathologically believed the entire street was merely a backdrop for his unnecessarily important existence. The Hornet was deployed in a hostile blockade across my driveway. I stood positioned on my new lawn, already flagged on the HOA watch list for being a catastrophic quarter-inch too high, and executed a fixed, analytical stare. My girlfriend Pam deployed from the structure holding coffee. She is the strategic intellect, the one who converts emotional energy into legal action. I, conversely, possess the patience of an agitated insect ready to strike. He executed the action again, I stated, my voice functionally flat. I visually confirm the action, Pam stated, instantly securing her phone. First, we document. She executed a triple redundant photographic sequence. The car, my immobilized truck, and the final shot securing the crime, the address, and the immutable timestamp in the same visual frame. She was actively constructing a judicial case against the HOA president's son before the first verbal contact. I encountered Officer Miller, a law enforcement operative whose expression registered profound exhaustion and initiated the silent authority move. I positioned the confrontation as a mere inconvenience, the modern art piece titled, "You are forbidden from initiating work today." The officer quickly calculated the situation and sighed, realizing the immediate multiplication of his paperwork. When he demanded Tyler move the vehicle under threat of City Ordinance 1157, blocking a private driveway, Tyler executed the fatal verbal error. He scoffed, deployed the arrogant refusal, "Go ahead, tow it, see if I care." This command, captured by the officer, was the irrevocable trigger. The flight officer immediately declared, "Tow authorized." The tow truck achieved arrival, a massive, unrefined mechanical asset. Karen Winters immediately deployed a desperate final defense, threatening the driver. "If you inflict damage upon that vehicle, I will assume legal ownership of your entire company." The tow driver neutralized her aggression with pure authority. "Ma'am, the city possesses ownership of the curb. I merely rent the chains." As the lift engaged, securing the rear wheels of the Yellow Hornet, the catastrophe initiated. We registered a massive, sickening fracture sound. It was the sound of a critical component executing structural failure. The car lurched violently, and the front hood slammed down and buckled with a loud impact. Tyler's jaw achieved contact with the pavement. The tow driver, after visually inspecting the damage, delivered the final, non-negotiable diagnosis. Aftermarket coilovers, fails to achieve rating for a lift. Cheap kit, it executed a fracture. His illegal modifications, deployed in a pathetic attempt to increase status, had directly guaranteed the total structural failure of his expensive asset under police-mandated procedure. Karen Winters immediately deployed a full turn of her fury toward me, shrieking, You executed this action!" I maintained a calm, absolute defense. All I executed was remaining positioned here and attempting to initiate work. Your son was the operative who commanded, "Proceed with the tow." The officer is a material witness. The police report was filed, documenting the illegal modification, the driver's refusal, and the catastrophic structural failure. The battle was terminated, but I processed the immediate chilling intelligence. Karen Winters' visual sensors confirmed the war had only initiated deployment. They had lost the car, but they were now dedicated to my total financial liquidation. The catastrophic liquidation of Tyler's Porsche was not an isolated incident. It was the unavoidable outcome of a conflict initiated by Karen Winters' systematic operational malpractice. To comprehend the magnitude of the counterstrike I was forced to deploy, you must first process the data regarding my own strategic architecture. I am Chad Reed, and my background is not in physical confrontation, but in logistics management and technical deployment, a career that translates directly into threat modeling, evidence redundancy, and operational elimination of bottlenecks. I believe in absolute sovereignty, and I secured my home as a fortress against corporate BS. I am, however, functionally balanced by my partner, Pam. She is the strategic intellect, the analyst who converts raw emotional energy into effective legal countermoves. I possess the patience of an agitated insect, but Pam operates with the unshakable composure of an elite tactical operative. She is the reason our defense against Karen Winters was always bulletproof. The conflict immediately escalated subsequent to the tow. Karen Winters, reeling from the uninsurable loss of her son's $90,000 asset, immediately deployed her HOA authority as a weapon of pure retaliation. We began receiving a constant barrage of formal threat letters, petty, vindictive, and meticulously calculated financial penalties. Letter 1. Grass height exceeding the 3-inch maximum, a documented violation of only 1/4 inch. Letter 2. A $25 fine for a refuse bin illegally positioned curbside overnight. Letter 3. A financial penalty for an unapproved lawn ornament, specifically a cheerful garden gnome. This was not governance. This was malicious, targeted harassment designed to induce financial liquidation by 1,000 paper cuts. Karen Winters was constructing a paper trail of non-compliance against us, strategically hoping I would fracture my composure and commit a major error she could weaponize for a full legal assault. Pam's analysis of this counterattack was immediate and absolute. She secured the HOA rulebook, a data directory thick with arbitrary mandates, and methodically verified every single penalty. She is technically correct about the recycling bin, Pam stated, demonstrating her superior strategic focus. Our operational position achieves victory by deploying superior intellect. She desires your anger and vocalization. We are forbidden from executing that. We will merely document everything. Pam's rule was non-negotiable. Document first, rage later. This strict adherence to legal compliance against every petty fine, even if it meant moving the gnome, was the critical authority beat that would ultimately defeat Karen. We denied Karen the emotional confrontation she craved, forcing her to escalate her tactics into the criminal realm. The expected escalation arrived at 0200 hours one night, confirming the necessity of our proactive defense. My triple threat surveillance system, small, high-definition, motion-activated cameras deployed across the driveway and fence line, registered an alert. The live feed confirmed a dark, hooded figure securing a small metallic object and deploying it along the side of my dark blue truck. The faint, high-pitched scratching sound registered through the speaker. Vandalism in progress. I experienced a surge of pure, white-hot rage and prepared for immediate physical confrontation. But Pam deployed the necessary psychological shield. She calmed me, directing my focus back to the technical asset. Did the camera secure the action? The subsequent review provided the irrefutable ultimate smoking gun. Tyler, the cowardly delinquent, was filmed keying my truck from front fender to back, the camera securing a clear facial shot, continuous action, and an immutable timestamp, irrefutable evidence of a felony criminal act. This deliberate, hate-filled act of vandalism, which incurred a $3,000 repair liability, converted the conflict from a mere property dispute into a non-negotiable criminal file. I immediately deployed the law, contacting Officer Miller and presenting the flash drive of irrefutable evidence. My logistical background ensured the data was flawless. Officer Miller, visibly impressed, secured the evidence and confirmed the legal action. A criminal file was opened with the prosecutor's office, vandalism, destruction of property, forcing Karen Winters to engage the criminal justice system to protect her son. This criminal evidence was then immediately weaponized for public exposure. I deliberately executed my statement for Officer Miller's body camera, ensuring my narrative was on the record and publicly accessible. I explicitly linked Tyler's criminal act, the keying, to Karen Winters' HOA presidency and the illegally modified Porsche that failed structurally during the lawful tow procedure. This action was not about information. It was about constructing a legal highway of public record that could be subpoenaed by the community. Karen Winters had demanded a paper trail against us. I provided a public documented chain of custody proving her and her son's malicious criminality. This meticulous adherence to technical credibility, cameras, timestamps, police reports, and body cam statements, was the unbreakable authority beat that secured our position, converting our defensive posture into an aggressive, legally fortified counterstrike. The exposure of Tyler's felony vandalism did not induce immediate capitulation from Karen Winters. Instead, it triggered a strategic shift in her deployment, moving from petty fines to the ultimate administrative weapon, the HOA Disciplinary Hearing. This was her endgame, a final, malicious attempt to utilize the illusion of democratic governance to execute our financial liquidation or force our immediate relocation. She issued a formal summons, a menacing, certified letter, citing a vague pattern of non-compliance and hostile behavior. We immediately recognized the threat. This would be a kangaroo court, controlled entirely by Karen Winters and her two sycophantic cronies on the board, designed to impose crushing, arbitrary fines based on the flimsy paper trail she had been meticulously constructing for months. She intended to secure a financial judgment that would either drain our resources or be used as legal leverage to declare us problem residents and force a sale. The moment the summons was received, Pam transitioned from strategic analyst to general of the counteroffensive. Our home immediately became an operational war room. Pam understood that their strategy relied on our emotional collapse or our failure to appear. We were forbidden from doing either. She meticulously printed every single piece of evidence. Massive, high-gloss photographs of Tyler's initial driveway blockade, irrefutable stills from the surveillance camera capturing his cowardly act of keying my truck, and a complete, notarized copy of the official police report detailing the vandalism and the uninsurable structural failure of the Porsche. This evidence was organized into a masterpiece of forensic documentation, tabbed and highlighted, designed not for the board's consumption, but for maximum public humiliation. The central genius of Pam's strategy was the weaponization of Karen's own hypocrisy. She calculated that simply defending ourselves was insufficient. We needed to shatter Karen's credibility before the entire community. Pam secured supplementary intelligence on Karen's own rule violations. We printed side-by-side comparison slides, our $25 refuse bin financial penalty positioned directly beside photographic proof of Karen's own refuse bin, still curbside 2 days later. Our fine for the unapproved lawn ornament, the gnome, was placed next to a high-gloss image of Karen's multiple gaudy plastic flamingos, clearly unapproved, flagrant violations of the same code. This comparison would instantly prove that Karen's entire enforcement policy was not governance, but targeted, malicious abuse of power designed solely to execute a vendetta against us. This strategic intelligence gathering led to the public authority reveal at the HOA hearing itself. The community clubhouse was saturated with nervous neighbors, all expecting the inevitable verdict against the new residents. Karen Winters sat at the head of the table, dressed in a severe, arrogant power suit, flanked by her 2 nodding conspirators. After delivering a droning monologue of bureaucratic tyranny and presenting her stack of bogus fine notices as proof of non-compliance, she issued the final condescending challenge. "Do you possess any counterstatement?" Pam took the floor, her voice clear, calm, and devastatingly strong. "We do, but we possess the conviction that displaying data is superior to merely vocalizing it." The projector was deployed, the ultimate tactical weapon. The hearing was transformed from a private kangaroo court into a public, synchronized exposé. The slides immediately began flashing. Exhibit A, the yellow Porsche blockading the driveway, labeled with the violated city ordinance. Exhibit B, the undeniable proof of Karen's hypocrisy, her unfined, illegal flamingos juxtaposed with my penalized gnome. This evidence shattered the crowd's fear and replaced it with unified contempt. The climax was absolute and irreversible, the projector screen filled with the high-def silent video of Tyler keying my truck. The footage, 10 feet high, captured the deliberate, cowardly criminal act in full view of the entire neighborhood. The room was subjected to absolute, stunned stillness. Tyler, positioned in the rear, was visually registered as shrinking into his chair as his crime was broadcast. Pam delivered the final, crushing summation. "We have filed an official police report. We possess a $3,000 estimate for the repairs. We possess the conviction that this action transcends a simple rules violation. We possess the conviction that this is a pattern of harassment and targeted abuse of power by our HOA president." The fear was totally liquidated, replaced by anger and revolt. Buddy James immediately executed a stand, sharing his own narrative of Karen's tyranny, followed by the rest of the neighbors who had finally found their shield of defense, our irrefutable proof. The public authority reveal at the HOA hearing secured our victory in the social domain, but the ultimate expert retaliation was dependent upon the technical discovery phase that followed, transforming Tyler's vandalism from a personal dispute into a matter of criminal and civil liquidation. The immediate consequence of our projector exposé was the prosecutor's office initiating deployment of a pre-trial diversion program against Tyler. This was a necessary tactical step, forcing the spoiled delinquent to face full restitution for the $3,000 damage to my truck and execute 100 hours of community service. This legal mandate ensured that the malicious act of keying carried a direct, quantifiable financial consequence, immediately validating our stance and forcing the Petons to acknowledge the debt. This criminal accountability was a critical authority beat, but it was merely the prelude to the catastrophic financial collapse that was about to unfold, orchestrated not by me, but by gravity and city bureaucracy. The universe provided the final, necessary piece of the puzzle: the arrival of the city construction crews. I registered their deployment with immediate strategic clarity. These crews began the excavation of a main water line trench directly along our narrow residential street, deploying massive machinery and marking the trajectory with bright orange paint. The key detail was the trench line. It was scheduled to be a massive, non-negotiable excavation that ran directly across Tyler's primary acceleration zone. The site was immediately fortified with the Safety Fortress Protocol, 2 massive, reflective, danger open trench signs, a long line of bright orange cones, and the ubiquitous plastic mesh fencing. This was not construction. This was a stage perfectly set for an uninsurable grand finale, and Tyler's own arrogance guaranteed he would take center stage. The fateful, uninsurable error was entirely self-inflicted. Tyler, fueled by the public humiliation of the HOA meeting and the forced restitution, saw the construction zone not as a safety warning, but as a challenge to his superior driving skill. He executed a high-velocity, intentional power slide around the final corner, determined to prove that a few cones could not contain his existence. He took the corner excessively wide, executing a fatal overcorrection. The Yellow Hornet, a 2,000-pound missile, disregarded the massive warning signs and smashed through the fencing like tissue paper. The sound was not a simple crash. It was a sickening crunch of metal and dirt, followed by the tinkle of shattering glass. The car nose-dived directly into the open trench, its rear wheels pointing to the sky for a final, glorious moment before settling into a crippled heap. The total structural failure was instantaneous, permanent, and complete, a monumental physical testament to his stupidity. The aftermath was a slow-motion festival of non-negotiable consequences, involving a full-spectrum deployment of authority: the fire truck, the ambulance, and the law enforcement units. Officer Miller arrived, surveying the site of the Porsche buried nose first in a city trench, and registered what I processed as the closest emotion to amusement he was capable of deploying. Karen Winters, deploying her final reservoirs of fury, shrieked at the city foreman. "This is your operational malfunction. You constructed a hazard." The foreman neutralized her claim with irrefutable fact. "Ma'am, we deployed 2 massive warning signs, a dozen cones, and 50 feet of fence. Your son executed driving through all of it. This operational failure is solely attributable to his actions." The stage was set for the final, absolute financial annihilation. The financial hammer beat was delivered by a succession of unbiased expert witnesses. First, the insurance investigator arrived, immediately executing a forensic examination of the wreckage. He confirmed the critical discovery made during the initial tow incident. The vehicle possessed illegal modifications: the altered aftermarket suspension Porsche coilovers, the illegally chipped engine computer, and the non-compliant exhaust system. The investigator delivered the lethal final ruling. The modifications were direct violations of the policy contract. Therefore, the collision claim was void. Zero payout for the totaled $90,000 asset. Karen Winters' face executed a color change from rage to absolute white as she processed the uninsurable nature of the destruction. The annihilation was completed by the city inspector, who stepped forward with his own clipboard, confirming the damages to public property. The charges were massive: a liquidated fire hydrant connection, compromised copper pipe, trench wall reinforcement liability, and the significant labor costs for the emergency crews. The city would transmit a massive, non-negotiable financial penalty to Karen Winters, a debt incurred solely because her son chose to use my street as a personal racetrack. Tyler received his own consequence: a ticket for reckless driving. The power structure had entirely collapsed. Karen Winters was left with a totaled, uninsurable vehicle, a massive public works debt, and zero remaining authority, all due to the fatal combination of gravity, arrogance, and documented contract violation. The uninsurable annihilation of the yellow Porsche in the city trench marked the absolute end of the Petons' physical dominance, but the confrontation escalation was far from over. Karen Winters, stripped of her car's collateral and facing a massive non-negotiable debt to the city of Hedon County, lost all rational control. Her initial shrieking denial at the IVI scene, attempting to frame the city foreman for creating a hazard, was her final public performance of power. The reality was that Tyler had been cited for reckless driving. The $90,000 asset was totalized with zero insurance payout, and the city was preparing to bill her for the liquidated fire hydrant connection and trench damage. The Petons were now cornered, and their desperation guaranteed a final, malicious counterstrike. The primary hammer to fall was the pre-trial diversion program mandated by the prosecutor's office for Tyler's keying offense. This criminal accountability forced the family to pay full restitution for the $3,000 damage to my truck. While the money was merely a fraction of their new debt, the consequence was existential. Tyler, the spoiled delinquent who believed he was above the law, was legally commanded to execute 100 hours of community service, literally picking up trash along the highway in a humiliating orange vest. This forced public servitude was the ultimate visible symbol of his liquidation of status, a direct public punishment for his cowardly act of vandalism. I had secured the criminal judgment, and the focus shifted back to the HOA's administrative structure. The total collapse of the Petons' financial stability immediately shattered Karen's political authority. The story of the uninsurable crash, the illegal modifications, and the massive city bill saturated the neighborhood's operational intelligence. No one was terrorized by her fine notices anymore. The HOA board, tired of defending her criminal actions, immediately initiated an open revolt. Neighbors, led by Buddy James, finally found the courage to sign a petition demanding accountability. State bylaws were invoked, forcing an emergency HOA meeting, not for frivolous fines, but for the formal removal of Karen Winters as HOA president. This disciplinary hearing was the true judicial betrayal of her power structure. The vote was not even proximate. Karen Winters was removed as president by a near-unanimous vote. The expert retaliation continued immediately. The newly elected board, led by Buddy James, now vice president, executed a forensic review of the financial records. They instantly discovered that Karen Winters had been using HOA funds to pay for landscaping services at her own private residence, a clear, documented breach of fiduciary duty. This final discovery allowed the new board to issue new, legally compliant financial penalties against Karen, reversing the polarity of the paper war and forcing her to face legitimate fines based on her actual corruption, not her fabricated rules. The narrative was cemented. She wasn't a strict leader. She was a documented financial criminal whose reign ended in total organizational failure. The combination of the uninsurable $90,000 loss, the massive city liability, the forced criminal restitution, and the loss of her HOA shield proved to be the absolute terminal liquidation of the Winters family. Tyler, serving his humiliating sentence in orange, and Karen, stripped of her title and facing legal fines, were left with nothing but non-negotiable debt and the knowledge that their campaign of harassment had only resulted in their own total financial and social destruction. The neighborhood returned to peace and sovereignty, having successfully defended their boundaries through strategic intelligence, unwavering legal compliance, and the catastrophic assistance of city works and gravity. The uninsurable annihilation of Tyler's Porsche and the subsequent judicial betrayal of Karen Winters in the HOA meeting initiated a cascading financial failure that was absolute and irreversible. The expert retaliation was no longer executed by me. It was deployed by city ordinance and insurance liability, weapons far more devastating than any personal confrontation. The total loss of the $90,000 asset was immediately secured by the insurance investigators' finding of illegal modifications, the chipped engine computer and aftermarket coilovers, triggering the willful misconduct exclusion and resulting in zero payout. This singular event stripped Karen Winters of her collateral and her financial shield, leaving the family exposed to the full, devastating force of the non-negotiable debts that followed. The financial hemorrhaging was immediate and two-pronged. First, the criminal accountability for Tyler's vandalism was finalized. The prosecutor's office commanded full restitution of the $3,000 repair cost for my truck, payable by the Winters family. Second, the city inspector's investigation concluded, leading to the transmission of a massive, non-negotiable financial penalty to Karen Winters for the destruction of public property. The liquidated fire hydrant connection, the copper piping, and the substantial labor required to reinforce the trench wall. Karen Winters, stripped of her insurance and facing immediate, overwhelming debt, was left defenseless against the quantified consequences of her son's arrogant tantrum. This debt was uninsurable, non-negotiable, and directly threatened the family's solvency. The total financial collapse of the Winters household was the precise catalyst needed to decapitate the HOA structure. The story of the uninsurable crash, the illegal modifications, and the subsequent city bill saturated the neighborhood's operational intelligence. Karen's authority was irrevocably shattered. The community, recognizing they were being led by a documented criminal whose actions now posed an existential financial threat to their stability, immediately activated the final defensive measures. Buddy James and the neighbors secured 2/3 of the community signatures required to invoke state bylaws, forcing an emergency HOA meeting with a singular agenda: the removal of Karen Winters as president. The resulting vote was not even proximate. The community executed a near-unanimous expulsion of Karen Winters from her title. Her political power, previously deployed as a weapon of misery, was structurally liquidated. The expert retaliation continued as the newly elected board, led by Buddy James, executed a forensic review of the financial records. They immediately discovered Karen's final act of corruption: the documented use of HOA funds to pay for landscaping services at her private residence. This final, irrefutable evidence of breach of fiduciary duty allowed the new board to immediately issue legally compliant fines against her, reversing the financial polarity and forcing her to account for her own corrupt mismanagement. The judicial betrayal was complete. The combination of the uninsurable loss, the massive city liability, the forced criminal restitution, and the final fines proved to be the terminal liquidation of the Winters family. Their strategic choice to defend criminal behavior had resulted in the total financial ruin of their household. Karen Winters was ejected from her throne. Her son was serving a humiliated sentence, and her entire family structure was left with nothing but non-negotiable, escalating debt. The debt of arrogance, all brought about by the fatal combination of gravity, stupidity, and a dedicated deployment of the rule of law. The weeks following the total financial collapse and the uninsurable annihilation of the yellow Porsche were characterized by a profound, pervasive peace that had been absent from our street for over a year. The mangled vehicle was permanently liquidated, hauled away to a junkyard, a physical monument to Tyler's terminal arrogance. The city completed their operational objective, filled in the trench, and laid down a fresh patch of asphalt, restoring the physical integrity of the street. The financial liquidation of the Winters family was now the final, non-negotiable reality. Karen Winters was formally expelled as HOA president, her authority irrevocably shattered. The new board, led by Buddy James, formalized the expert retaliation by rescinding all the petty, illegal fines Karen had leveled against the neighbors and successfully imposing new, legally compliant fines against Karen herself for her documented financial corruption. The final act of criminal accountability was secured when the prosecutor finalized the pre-trial diversion program for Tyler's vandalism. He was commanded to pay the full $3,000 restitution for the damage to my truck and execute 100 hours of community service. The sight of Tyler, the delinquent who believed his status superseded city ordinances, serving his humiliating sentence in a bright orange vest along the highway, a color that offered a perfect, stark contrast to the yellow of his former arrogance, was the ultimate visible symbol of his defeat. Justice had been secured not through confrontation, but through systematic, documented compliance and unwavering legal authority. The legacy secured was not just the restitution, it was the total liberation of the neighborhood. This atmosphere was friendlier than previously, the fear of Karen's tyranny entirely liquidated. The neighbors, having witnessed the complete collapse of the winter's power structure, now displayed their defiance openly, restoring their garden gnomes and unapproved lawn ornaments in a silent, collective celebration of sovereignty. Pam and I finalized the repairs to the small section of our fence that was damaged in the crash aftermath. As we were finishing the final operational task, Buddy James traversed our perimeter, presenting us with a small, secured brass plaque. The plaque was the ultimate permanent monument to the entire ridiculous affair. Engraved upon it were 4 simple, non-negotiable words: "Gravity always wins." We mounted it directly onto the new segment of the fence, a constant, physical reminder of the uninsurable consequences of arrogance and the superiority of physics over pathological entitlement. The legacy was cemented. We secured our peace and quiet. We secured full restitution, and we secured the collapse of the corrupt organizational structure. The critical life lesson absorbed from this entire operational sequence is absolute. Justice is not always executed in a courtroom. Sometimes it is executed through strategic patience, the relentless power of a camera, the unwavering authority of a police report, and the catastrophic assistance of a very helpful excavation in the ground. Karen Winters and her spoiled delinquent son were not defeated by anger or violence. They were annihilated because they refused to respect the most basic principles of law and liability. We secured the victory by deploying superior intellect, maintaining flawless documentation, and enabling the opposition to drive themselves into total, uninsurable ruin. Remember, your property is your domain. Your boundaries possess operational significance, and no individual, regardless of their pathological self-importance, possesses the right to treat you as if you are invisible. Defend your position, document everything, and trust that accountability always achieves final contact with everyone.